Welcome to another Genre Art with JB, and welcome back to this fourth part in my oil painting process. What I'm doing below is I have my toned palette so that I can clearly see my colors, and you'll notice that I have it sped up, so I'm going quite fast. But to my left I have some pristine brush cleaner, in the middle I have some turpenoid, and then I have dirty brush cleaner. I like to have a little bit of both dirty and pristine brush cleaner, because sometimes I want to paint the color slightly dirty. And what I'm doing is I'm taking some black and white, ivory black, and I'm taking some not flake white, but titanium white, and I'm putting it on my palette, and I'm creating what we call a gray line, which is used to sort of give me a guide as far as a transition from light to dark value is concerned. So you'll see I have white at the top, that's my lightest value, then I have a lighter value, slightly darker with like a light gray, then I have a neutral, one space from the bottom, then I have a dark gray, and then I have pure black. So I go all the way from white to pure black with my gray line. And what this helps me do is once I have my gray line established on my palette, I can then take the colors that I'm going to be using and do light and dark versions of each color that correspond with the black and white values I have all the way over to the right of my palette. So I'm using that gray line, as we call it, as sort of a guide for what the value of my color is going to be. And of course I have my reference in front of me, and what I'm doing is I'm painting a red dragon. So this video is going to skip around in bits and pieces as far as, showing some various stages of completion of my painting, but what you're going to be seeing today is a little bit of me laying in the sky and then me starting to paint the head of the dragon in. So I'm getting those colors ready. I've already painted in quite a bit of the body, the tail, and the back. And what I'm doing is my reference, I'm referencing a lot of old school D&D art. I really like how a lot of those classic D&D artists painted dragons. Not as big of a fan of how they painted their figures. I think artists today put much more of an emphasis on the characters. But back in the day, I felt like old school D&D artists just really went crazy with how they depicted the creatures in for the key art and cover art and whatnot, and card art and what have you. So what I'm doing is I'm creating different grades of orange red, and I'm going from sort of a yellow, light yellow with a hint of orange through to a warm red, and I'm using cadmium red for that, and then going all the way down to a brown, mixing black and red, and then again orange to get me those various grades of brown. You'll see here I've switched over to a view of my canvas, and it's a little hard to see because my big back keeps getting in the way, but every time I step away, you can see I'm adding a little bit more to that sky. What I've done is I've oiled down my panel, and I always oil down my panel before I go in, and I work from the back to the front. That's another thing that I think is very beneficial to do when you're doing imaginative realism, or you're doing any sort of work of art that requires you to set characters in a scene, right? And for this, I consider the dragon a character. And then now we have a zoomed in shot of our dragon here. I actually went back in after this and I really fixed the symmetry on the face. There were some symmetry issues that I noticed after the fact, which you'll notice quite a bit. And I also will typically oil down my surface again before I apply the paint. And then once the paint's applied, I will be adding linseed oil to the paint on my palette to keep it sort of from hardening, from drying, if you will. And I'll go in after the first coat is somewhat dry and do a glaze over the whole face to sort of bring all of the colors on my face and all the values into one key. I'm not quite there yet. I'm just doing the first pass right now. And even on that second, that our left, his right side of the face that's in shadow, that's still the first pass as well. So I am going to go back in later, and in future videos you'll see that I've gone back in and sort of brought all these colors into a consistent key. They're pretty consistent right now, but I find that on certain textures like rocks, scales, that sort of thing, glazing can be hugely beneficial. I try to avoid glazing on human skin. I like to go wet on wet and keep the colors as thin as possible, whether I'm doing faces though or whether I'm doing a reptile. Well, thanks everybody. That's it. Have a great day.